Tonight, is this the most influential woman in British politics? Alex Phillips is unveiled as the new face of the Reform Party. Britain's first black police and crime commissioner tells me kicking out bent coppers will stop the scandals. Festus Akinbusoye is cleaning up the force. And watch out, Westminster, I'm dropping a bombshell of my own. That's all in the next hour. Hello and welcome to Friday Night with Nadine. I'm Nadine Dorries and tonight I'm joined by sketch writer for The Times, Quentin and Christopher Hope from The Telegraph. It's been a big week in politics with a cabinet reshuffle, the return of Liz Truss and President Zelensky's historic visit to the UK. But before we get into that, I've got some news of my own. After much soul-searching, I've decided not to stand as an MP at the next general election. I love my constituents and I've loved serving them, and it's been such an honour for the best part of 2 decades of my life. However, given the poll ratings of the Conservative Party, we're now likely to go to the wire in January 2025. And that's the worst, weakest and least attractive position for any government to find itself in. There is no way on God's earth that those who plotted to depose Boris Johnson expected to be in the position we're in today. The Conservatives are polling worse now than in 1997, when they were thrashed by Labour. The elite, the faux political intellectuals, you know who I'm talking about, those who believe that they know better than anyone else, bet everything on a Rishi bounce. But it never came, and it was never going to. The party was 5 points behind on the day that Boris Johnson was ousted. And, you know, I've said this before, that is a poll deficit that would have burnt away like a summer's mist on a morning lawn in the heat of a general election campaign. Today, the party is 24 points behind. And that, my friends, could be described as terminal. It leaves the party boxed into a corner with no exit route. Those MPs who drank the Kool-Aid and got rid of Boris Johnson are already asking themselves the question, who next? And I'm afraid that the lack of cohesion, the infighting, and occasionally the sheer stupidity from those who think we could have removed a sitting Prime Minister who secured a higher percentage of the vote share than Tony Blair did in 1997, just 3 short years ago, that they could do that and the public would let us get away with it. I'm afraid it's this behaviour that I now have to just remove myself from. And so, despite it being a job that I've loved for every year that I've done it, I'm now off. My gosh, I just said it out loud. There's no going back now.
Wow.
So, guys, did you expect that?
Have you told the Chief Whip?
No, I haven't.
News desk, get on to the tavern.
You look emotional, Nadine.
I actually...
You're welling up.
Yeah, just saying it out loud. It's something I've only thought. And
I can understand why you're going, Nadine. I think it's a pity you're going. For 2 reasons. One, that we sketch writers need people like you to write about. But also because it seems to me you'd be better staying and fighting the battle from within. But...
Quentin,
it's not my fight. But,
I get that, and I get that accusation. I also get the accusation, oh, you know, you're a bit like a rat leaving the sinking ship. The fact is, I think that today's parliamentary party, when I look back, and you guys are around as well, when I look back to when I first became an MP, both, you know, and you might say, well, you know, they got rid of Margaret Thatcher, and they do. Regicide, I think, is now a DNA. But I think where we are now, when I look back at the type of MPs who were there then and where we are now and how the party's behaving now, I just don't see any way. Fight for what? Fight with who? People are only fighting each other in my party.
I think you're wrong about the possibility of the opinion polls changing. I'd have thought that it's still a long way out, and it's like trying to call an American presidential election from a year out is always a hazardous
A lot happens
occupation.
at that time. I mean,
oh my gosh,
just 16 months ago, people were talking about a 3-term Boris Johnson government. In September 2021, and then it all unravelled very quickly with Partygate, and there was lack of discipline. It's great. I mean, will you be joining the Lords? I mean, are you out of?
Do you know what? Everybody's
that's the question.
The only person who's heard nothing about this is me.
You've been tipped.
You guys all seem to know about this. I've heard nothing.
Would you want to come back as a peer?
Honestly, I don't know. I'm just getting through the emotional aspect of
Have you told your
leaving a job I've
association?
loved for 19 years.
Have you told the association yet?
Yes, yeah. I told my chairman this afternoon.
Yeah. And you're someone, I think, who has always got what being a Tory is, I think. In a way, you had to go at the posh boys. You know, you kicked against that, didn't you, with David Cameron, George Osborne. You're an amazingly successful novelist. You've done it all off your own back. You've got this huge Scouse spirit in you, I think, which is really where the party should be going. Look at Lee Anderson. I think he's part of that kind of telling like it is.
The Red Wall.
The Red Wall.
So, yeah, I was a bit of an oddity when I arrived. I used to talk like that.
Yeah.
And when I talk like that, MPs used to look at me and go, where's she from?
Yeah.
You're the Green Wall tonight.
I'm a Green Wall tonight, yeah.
They will massively regret, and they still do, dropping Boris Johnson. That was, for me, an offence against democracy. You can't really... And nowadays, I know you elect MPs who elect their own leader, so you're not electing a leader in an election, but I think there's a feeling there that you really are electing a leader who stays in post throughout the 5-year term, I think. And that's the mistake. And they've got this Boris-shaped hole who will keep trying to do his stuff from the sidelines.
And, you know, I totally get what you say about it being, Quentin, both of you, a long way to the next general election. A lot happens, goodness me, in a week. We've got, 2 years to go. But we will never be able to undo the harm that we've done and the wrong that we did. And, yes, the people don't love Starmer in the way that, say, 97, they love Tony Blair. But that doesn't mean that we're going to be able to completely reverse this and go all the way back to being where we were 3 years ago, which was an 80-seat majority, a bigger percentage of the vote share than Tony Blair got in 97. I don't think we're ever going to get back to that, and I think we blew it. The day we got rid of our election winner, we blew it. And, yeah.
Have you told Boris Johnson you're off?
Yeah, he knows.
Well, what did he say?
He doesn't want me to go. So he said exactly what you said. Nad, stay.
Yeah.
But... no, it's time to go. You know when it's time to go. Anyway.
But do you think it was worth it, being an MP? Do you feel that you got some reward out of it?
So, yeah, when you're an MP, the reward you get is not what you guys see. It's not on the floor of the House of Commons. It's not the stuff you report. It's what happens on a Friday in your constituency surgery when you can actually make huge difference to the lives and the outcomes of individuals and the problems that they have and the situations that they're dealing with. That, every Friday, the part of my job I've loved most is my surgeries on a Friday.
How do you want to be remembered?
She's not dead.
As an MP? No, as you draw... Not dead. As you draw a curtain across your time as an MP, what would people say about
Well, I
Nadine
know
Dorries
how
MP?
I'll be remembered. I know I'll be remembered as the MP who called David Cameron and George Osborne a pair of posh boys, the price of milk. That's what I'll probably be remembered for. But I'd like to be remembered for having been Secretary of State for DCMS and the huge amount we've got achieved in those 12 months.
Well, Nadine, Christopher and I suspected that you might be saying something like this. So we had a whip around, and a couple of the backstage people too, and they came up with a present for you. So here you are. It says you're a winner, which is not normally given to people who've been kicked out of the cabinet. But there you are.
I was not kicked out of the cabinet. I did not take the re-promotion.
But there you are. Show the ladies and gentlemen.
And that's because...
It's like a blank checkbook and pen.
I think I've been given this. I think what I might be remembered for is probably being the biggest pain in the backside of most of the leaders and prime ministers of the Conservative Party. I think that's
Would you accept a medal when you stand down? There's an idea this week, isn't there, from Charles Walker MP to give medals to exiting MPs. Would you accept a medal?
Well, we're actually going to go on and talk about that.
OK.
In a second.
Jumping the gun, maybe.
So outgoing MPs should receive medals and a more generous redundancy payment after they leave office, going back to what you've just said, Christopher. That's according to a report from the Administration Committee. I think the payout's fair enough. The medal slightly confuses me slightly. What do you guys think? And thank you for mine.
I think it's a dreadful idea. I think if anyone deserves a medal, it's the voters for putting up with a lot of the MPs. And I've been always very uncomfortable with the idea of payoffs, not only for MPs, but also for ministers. When you leave the service of the Crown, you should not be given a payoff. And certainly when you leave the employment of the electorate, they've reached a decision. They do not want you anymore. And I don't think that they want you to receive a payoff.
Well, of course, Nadine won't get one because she's signalling she's going now.
And that leaves me free to say what I'm going to say, actually.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I won't, because I'm standing down of my own free will.
When you get voted out,
but
it seems to be quite wrong.
But, Quentin, as you well know, a lot of people who become MPs, they give up stable jobs. The average life of an MP is 8 years. Some only have 4 at the most, you know?
Yeah.
And there is nothing so as an ex-MP. I know MPs have been out of work since 2017. You know, who lost still. When I came in 2005, I met MPs who'd been out since 1997 and hadn't been able to find a job. No one wants to hear what you've got to say. No one wants to talk to you. Not even the person stood next to you in the job centre queue.
I think a medal. Don't be such a grump. I think a medal is fine.
Come on, what's the medal going to say?
I don't know what the medal's for, but I definitely
for your
think...
service. It's the Friday afternoon service you gave to your constituents.
Absolutely satirical idea.
No, but Quentin, what about the whole thing of, you know, we know, and I knew this during the expenses crisis in 2009, we would see the general overall quality of MPs decrease as a result. What about the enticement to get people into politics? You know, if you say to them, we want to give up your life for 4 years, possibly only 4 years, to go and work in this place, but you'll get nothing at the end of it when you're kicked out. Yeah. Don't we want to entice good people into politics?
Well, I disagree with you very strongly, because actually I think the standard of MPs now, standard of backbenchers, the standard of parliamentary committees, much, much higher now than it was in the 1990s. I started sketching at the end of the Thatcher years, and it was getting a bit mouldy then. 97, they came in a real duff lot of MPs. And I think today's Commons, on all sides of the House, is much more impressive than it used to be. But I do go back to this idea that there shouldn't be any sense of entitlement amongst our elected parliamentarians. They are there thanks to the electorate, and they're there to do the job of the electorate. And if they get the idea that, oh, we're poor little Hectors who deserve something, I think you end up with really much worse MPs. So I think they need to be made much more alive to the facts of life.
Well, you depressed me saying that the quality of MPs today is much better than it used to be. So, this week we had Rishi Sunak's first cabinet reshuffle. Greg Hands becomes party chair, with Lee Anderson, who's been in the news a lot this week, as his deputy. Grant Shapps now looks after energy, and Kemi Badenoch is promoted to business secretary. My old department, DCMS, was broken up, which honestly I think is a mistake. Quentin, isn't reorganising Whitehall something that you do when your government is in a really strong position and you're knocking it out the park in terms of legislation and policy? Is it really something you should be focusing on when you're supposed to be speaking to the electorate, wanting to get a message over, and you're 24 points behind in the polls?
Yeah, I don't think it matters at all. I don't think it makes...
and isn't that the point? It doesn't matter at all.
Well, I don't think it matters to the electorate in terms of how they might vote. But it may matter on a technocratic level. I don't know. I'm not clever enough to understand these things. And the idea of making science more prominent in the government might be a reasonable suggestion.
Come on. There's been a month of secret meetings with all of the key aides in Number 10 locked in a room planning this. Really, shouldn't they have been locked in a room planning, how do we not lose the next election? Yeah. How do we level up? How do we deal with the cost of living crisis? How do we help people pay their energy bills? How do we help people with their mortgages?
It's a job creation reshuffle. No one lost. There's no blood on the carpet at all. Everyone got a job. Civil servants get new name badges. It costs tens of thousands of pounds. I mean, Labour's already looking at the acronym for the Department for Business and Trade is DET. Or it could be... Or it could be
Are you serious?
Yeah, Department of Business and Trade is debt, and Business and Trade could be bust. So it's debt or bust. It's not as bad as the Department of Productivity, Energy and Industry, which...
yes, all right.
Which is Tony Blair. That reminds you of a piece of some anatomy from 2005 with Tony Blair. We had to rename it very quickly because it became something else. Too early to say on a Friday night. But I think it is... it's what officials like this makes no difference. And it's what should have happened probably if COVID hadn't happened and they'd thought hard about the need to refocus Whitehall. You do it in the first 6 months of a 4-year government.
Exactly.
You don't do it 18 months out of an election and think it makes any difference. It's almost giving Labour a chance here to get the growth that this might engender. And also, why do you need to do this? Why? I mean, having a net zero department, by the way, which you haven't mentioned.
Yeah, well, that's a vote loser.
Well, that's... that's almost enshrining what Theresa May's last act was as Prime Minister, to push that through. And net zero is quite a toxic thing for Conservatives.
So, well, thanks on that. And it's, and I think you've hit all the right points. It actually doesn't matter right now, and it's not the time to do it when you're 2 years out of an election. So we're going to move on to Liz Truss. She's remained completely silent since she left Downing Street in October. But this week, Liz Truss stepped back into the spotlight. She stood by her economic policies, but doesn't fancy returning to number 10.
I went in with a very clear agenda about what we needed to deliver. All kinds of events took place, which I wasn't expecting and Kwasi wasn't expecting, frankly. I also think the political support I had during my time in number 10, it wasn't enough to achieve the type of bold reforms I was looking to achieve.
Do you regret going for Prime Minister?
No, I don't regret it.
And would you want to be Prime Minister again?
No, I'm not desperate to get back into number 10, no.
So, look, if she wanted to get...
Death to ratings.
If she wanted to get people talking about economic growth and her growth policies, why did she write in the Telegraph and do her interview in The Spectator? Because she's talking to people who are already singing off her hymn street. Was it successful? Are people now talking about growth again? Because I can't see it.
I think they are a little bit, actually, in the bubble, which is sometimes where it starts. I'm not sure that it's necessarily been talked about much in The Dog and Duck, but then it probably seldom is. But, you know, old Truss, I mean, everyone's been sort of presenting this, Truss is back on the warpath and she wants to become, El Grand Quasar again. I don't think that's ever going to happen. She's never going to be Prime Minister again. But there's nothing wrong with her putting out these arguments, and I think that's an entirely fine thing to do. She doesn't move off the bat very fast. I mean, she's a terrible communicator. Yeah. And, you know, that TV interview was pretty gluey. And also, then she wrote a 4,000-word piece. Did you read it?
I did, actually.
Oh, good boy.
I have to, Quentin. I have to. Yeah,
God, it was all full of economics. I couldn't understand a word of it.
She's a classic op-ed leader in my world. So she writes very good commentary pieces. Yeah. But when you see her up close, you think, oh, blimey. But I think that debate is there, though. That debate is starting again.
It is starting again.
It is. And, you know, the thing about Liz is the policies were right, the growth was right. The £30 billion predicted black hole, of course, never happened because it was just a prediction. And, in fact, the government made a profit, I think, on the gilts that it sold. So all that catastrophe, you know, from the OBR and all of the others and the Bank of England that was predicted never actually happened. She was right, but my point is I think she's still being badly advised about how she rolls this stuff out. And I think that was actually just highlighted by where she wrote her article. Not there's anything wrong with the Sunday Telegraph, but 4,000 words, and where she did her TV interview, it didn't have the reach.
But what do your members, or your people who won't be your members much, much longer, what do they think about the Trussette? Do they go for her, or do they think she's a disaster?
So they liked her ideas, but they didn't like the way... I think they were disappointed once Liz became Prime Minister, to your point about communicating and the way the pitch wasn't rolled as they saw it. But they liked her ideas because her ideas are core conservative ideas.
She's become a national joke, but you can turn that to your advantage. Yeah. And there comes a point at which you somehow go around the back of the moon, having been a national joke, and then people are prepared to look at you again.
Look, guys, we're all the national joke. You know, Liz doesn't have the monopoly on that. We're all the national joke.
I'm local.
OK, so coming up, former MEP and Brexiteer Alex Phillips is the new face of the Reform Party. She thinks they're the biggest threat to the Tories at the next election. She could be right. Find out why after this break. Welcome back to Friday Night with Nadine. My next guest could be one of the most influential women in politics ahead of the next general election. Alex Phillips is the new face of Reform UK, and polling shows they're gaining popularity, and it could be a real threat to the Conservatives. She's a Brexiteer, former MEP, and wants to smash through the red wall. Alex joins us now. Alex, why have you decided to come? Because you were a Brexit MP for the Brexit Party MEP for what, 6 months? You, as you've said to me, you campaigned vigorously for redundancy. Yeah. What has made you decide to get back into politics now?
Gosh, well, there's multifaceted reasons. I mean, I've been in politics for a long time and the woman that no one's really heard of, but I was Nigel Farage's great enabler for the best part of a decade, worked really, really hard to get a referendum and then through the Brexit Party to get Brexit done. And essentially the Brexit Party has been in a coma for 2 years. It's been on life support. It's been ticking over, rebranded as Reform, building from the bottom up. And I had actually rejoined the Conservative Party. I thought maybe my, fringe politics.
And are you still
days...
a member?
No. I did my coming out, so to speak, with the Telegraph, and quickly had an email from the chairman saying bye-bye. So that's fair enough. But just from talking to people, I kind of thought, well, maybe we're back to two-party politics, and that the Conservatives are going to get this right now. But I feel like I've been in an abusive relationship with them. I feel like I've been lied to. I've been gaslit.
Lied to? That's a bit
strong.
strong.
But in terms of the last time, before this last time, as a member of the Conservative Party, was when Theresa May first broke through onto the scene as the PM. And she said, I'm going to do fracking, I'm going to bring back grammar schools, I'm going to have proper Brexit. None of it. And so I thought, OK, I'm done with this now. And then it was very clear, because of the political stalemates going on over Brexit, and a lot of the Conservative Party back then were the disablers, in fact, the Dominic Grieves and Anna Soubries of this world. And so it was natural for me to go and rejoin Nigel and say, we've got to push this through.
But Alex, you knew that those days, they were never going to be easy. They were always going to...
No,
the Anna Soubries, you're right, and the Dominic Grieves, it was always going to be a fight.
Yeah, and
because we were fighting for sovereignty, so it was really important.
And we were this close. We were this close to losing it, which is why the Brexit Party stood down
Which is why proroguement happened.
And, why the Brexit Party stood down a load of candidates and said, here you go. Then the Conservative Party got an 80-seat majority, and I thought, finally... this is it. We're going to get Brexit done. I mean, look, the withdrawal agreement is a mess, but I don't actually blame Boris for that, because we were this close to losing it that something had to be delivered and signed. But then I thought, well, look, we need to now work on this. We need to actually seize the benefits of sovereignty and, self-assertiveness as a country that actually does put Britain first and has confidence in our future. And then, of course, the pandemic came. And I understand that delayed a lot of things. And I'm not angry at the fact that there was this pregnant pause in the middle of politics where things couldn't really get done. But then after that, the protracted psychodrama of last year, where we had numerous different chancellors, with the Prime Minister changing all the time, this long drawn-out leadership contest, which essentially drove the country into the ground economically. No wonder the IMF have said, you're in an economic mess. Why on earth would anyone invest in Britain when they don't even know who the Chancellor is or what the agenda is?
Oh, come on, Alex. The IMF never predicts anything right.
I agree with you on that. I do agree with you on that.
Most of the things the IMF say they get wrong.
But, the Conservatives, we've had a Conservative-led government for 12 years, and I can't really identify what the legacy is. And that's a crying shame. I don't want the Conservative Party to do badly. I never have done. I want them to be better.
But do you accept, Alex, that even though it was 2016 when we had that referendum, and even though Boris Johnson delivered on Brexit, and you're quite right, it was the part. I mean, guys, you remember the party was the position we were in then was in danger of everything being lost.
Oh, I know.
So where we are now is in a very different position to where we were in 2016.
But if I'd been in a coma for a decade and woke up and looked at the level of taxation we've got, looked at the paucity of our public services, looked at the march of sort of mad neoliberal views that are drowning out common sense opinion and a majority-held opinion, I'd think we've had a radical socialist government for a decade, not a right-wing government. And what I've realised is as soon as that electoral threat is taken away from the right wing of politics, the sense of duty and service to people seems to diminish. The Conservatives act better when they've got a challenge. And I think we're in a situation now, everyone I know who's, from our side of politics is saying, I just can't vote Conservative. I can't forgive them for what's gone on. I can't forgive them for squandering the 80-seat majority. Whether you agree with that or not, that is a very widely held point of view, and the polling shows that. So who do they vote for? Because they've either got the Labour Party, who are pretending to be centrist, and as soon as they get to the levers of power, they won't be, and then all the other radical left parties. So where does that vote go? And I think it's fresh and healthy in a democracy to provide people with a vehicle that they can trust, with a vehicle they want to vote for, rather than think, I'm obliged to vote for either a party that seemingly can't deliver what I want, or a party that doesn't want to deliver what I want. How about voting for something that says it will deliver what I want?
And that's great. I would encourage anyone who has strong health views like yours and wants to be a part of what happens in Westminster and to deliver on the things that you want to deliver on. But how are you going to do that? Are you going to stand for a seat at the next general election?
Yeah, I will do. And
where are you going then?
Well, I don't know, but we're far out
you
from
may
the
have
elections.
noticed there's just become a vacancy in
reform's cranking up now. So let's see what happens with the map, the electoral map, and where target seats might fall. And under the first past the post system, I'm very alive to the fact that it's almost impossible. But is it impossible? You know, if the collective enough said this could be a solution to our problems, then actually no, it isn't then too long a shot.
So, you know, I do remember, having been around for a very long time, a point at which I think it was 2012 when UKIP were presenting a very real threat to the Conservative Party. I mean, I know they
2013.
2013.
Yeah, 2013
and
2014.
I know they spooked David Cameron, George Osborne a lot at the time.
A lot of things that happened, you know, actually having the opportunity to have a referendum wouldn't have happened without the UKIP threat. I think Brexit would have been lost without the Brexit Party threat. So this is what I'm talking about. Actually, as soon as that threat disappears, something happens to the Conservatives where they start playing parlour games and you know, pursuing these intra-party fights and wrestling for the heart of what Conservative ideology should be. They take their eye off the ball and they stop delivering.
It's hurting me listening to you now, Alex.
You know, it hurts me too.
Quentin and Christopher, what do you think?
Well, Alex describes a very intoxicating brew, and I can quite understand a lot of her feelings about this. But I think that there was a time, and I think it's probably still true to an extent at the moment, that after all the Boris downfall and the Truss explosion, I think there was a public demand for some calmer times, less tumult went up the cry. And I think that's probably, that there's this stability. I mean, Rishi Sunak is not a most entertaining person politically, but the fact that he's not noisy and the fact that he isn't radical, I think has a certain appeal. And I suspect he's probably a bit more right-wing himself than he's allowing us to see at the moment.
I agree with you on that, actually, and I have no problem with Rishi. I like Rishi, actually. You know, if I could have picked anybody from the Conservative Party to be PM, it would be Rishi. But I just have this feeling that the party inherently, the Conservative Party, seems to be broken. It doesn't seem to be able to... With an 80-seat majority to mess it up, as much as they have done, it's unforgivable.
Righties are very always having arguments, and that's part of being on the right, isn't it?
So why not welcome someone else's space?
Is it time for reform, Christopher?
It is, but I think the Tory party, has lost its way on taxation and other areas. And what Richard Tyson and you, Alex, were doing with reform is sitting there to the right of the Tory party, drawing the party probably towards where it should be for the election. But there's some good polling out this week we did in the Telegraph, showing that 6% of the votes will go to reform of the election.
How many?
6% of the votes, but no MPs. Instead, it hollows out the Tory support and gives Labour an even bigger win.
So can I ask a question?
So do you worry you're giving Labour power?
Are you putting candidates forward at the local elections in May?
Yeah, I've got lots, and there's some stories about that coming out soon. I can't break them right now, but you know, it's interesting. There's always been this fallacy that a sort of another party on the right, because what you've got to remember is the Conservatives have a monopoly of the right. The Labour don't have a monopoly of the left. But, you know, there's this idea that, therefore, if a party emerges on the right, it's going to eat into the Conservative votes. Now, I spent a lot of time at UKIP back when it was a sensible party and was really an electoral threat. And so I know what the data was and the polling and the psephology and the demographics. And actually, 1/3 of UKIP's vote came from Tories, 1/3 came from Labour, another third came from people who hadn't
So,
wanted
Alex,
to
I've
vote
got to take
anybody.
issue with that because I've seen Stephen Day, Cheadle, 2001. I've seen Conservative MPs lose their seats because UKIP ate into their votes.
Yeah.
I've seen that
But
happen.
I've seen what happened in 2019, where actually the Conservatives managed to break through into Labour-held seats that they didn't stand a chance of getting until the debate was opened out by someone like Nigel Farage to a demographic who wouldn't have ever dreamt of voting Conservative.
Can I ask one thing? Are you in talks with any Tory MPs about joining Reform? There's one here who's standing down.
Oh, we'd
No,
love you.
I'm not
We'd love
standing
you.
down to stand again.
We'd love you. No, I'm not personally doing that, and it's not my place to do that.
Because that would be a real worry, I think,
Richard.
for the Rishi Sunak.
I think what's going to happen, and Reform has been building up quietly and slowly in the background, and now it's time to, get the turbo boosters fired up and say, we're here, learn about us, consider us. And I think when that happens, things could move, and they could move quickly. Maybe the needle won't be moved at all, but I think things could move and could move quickly. And when that starts to happen, it creates a domino effect.
Well,
so it
Alex,
could be interesting.
You're scaring me, and I'm standing down. So what I'd like to talk
We
to
have
you about...
time to persuade you.
What I'd like to talk about is women in politics. We have this thing in the Conservative Party, ask her to stand, this kind of campaign. I would never ask any woman to stand for politics, ever. I would never... I want to use the word allow, but I can't allow, they're all in their 30s. I would never encourage my 3 daughters to become female MPs. It's very different. And, I feel like I've been there 5 minutes. It's very different from when I started 18, 19 years ago. The abuse and, I'm not going to go into details, but, you're a woman and you're about to stand for politics. What do you think about what women have to face in politics now?
It's not just politics, is it? This is the
No,
point.
it's
There's
true.
a coarsening.
It's
There's
very
a
true.
coarsening of what's going on in society in general, and a toxicity which no one's talking about. Which is, we bang on about having all-female shortlists. I hate that stuff. I'm really not for that sort of positive discrimination. I think it undermines talented women. But what no one's talking about is the fact that we've got MEP police officers stating misogynistic views, discussing rape, sharing pornography in WhatsApp groups. It's not just police officers doing this. It's not just the fire service. It's a group of guys in an estate agency. I've always had this, for a long time, I've held this belief that something has happened since hardcore pornography became normalised, that women have once again been essentially denigrated to being objects, to being things that can be traded, to being dehumanised, and that this coarsening is actually now beginning to take root across society, and it emboldens people.
It's the normalisation of language that is discussed. So, 10 years ago, people would make comments that they'd make, young men would make, odd men would make, sat in their underpants in their mum's attics on a laptop, and they'd put things online that they would never dream of saying to anybody out in the street. But over a period of time, we've seen the normalisation of that kind of language and rhetoric. Now we see it all the time on videos. Now people do it. We've all seen the coarsening of public language and how people address each other.
And there's an expectation being placed so heavily on little girls to look like Kardashians, who have no discernible talents. They're not actresses. They don't sing songs. They're essentially made on a surgeon's table for the male gaze. And this pressure is being piled on women, but at the same time, it's distorting the view that men have of women. What I'd say to all women anywhere is, first of all, get off Instagram if you're doing all that and, getting your stuff
Alex,
out.
And I'd agree with you. But, the advice that is given to many women is just don't look. Why shouldn't we look? Why should it be OK for men to look, but women can't look? Right. Why should it be OK for men to take pictures and put them on Instagram, but not OK for women? And I think that's part of the problem. Women should be able to do exactly what they want to do, exactly the same as men do. We shouldn't have to do something else or behave differently just in order to protect ourselves.
I agree with that, but there's always biological truths about the different wiring of brains between men and women, and a transaction that happens, between the two sexes when it comes to relationships, which is, our powers being fundamentally eroded in that department. But, I would say to any woman out there, dress how you want. Put on... look at me, I'm covered in makeup. I love it. I'm a girly girl in many respects, but I don't define myself by my appearance. I define myself by my intelligence. And then I'd say to anybody on social media, you don't have to read the comments.
You're standing down now. Do you feel you could have done more when you were running the culture department on this? I mean,
when I arrived in the department, the online safety bill, it was literally... the advice that was given to me by former culture secretary was, it's a horrible bill, kick it into the weeds. And actually that was almost like throwing down a gauntlet for me. Because when I realised what that bill could achieve and what I could do with it, I got 97% of that bill passed through Parliament before I left, protecting women and young girls online from some of the awful, insidious dreadful behaviour that changes, that gives them terrible outcomes was like my main priority. And you asked me before, what would I want to be remembered for? I think doing that, actually.
Do you know, I hope you are remembered for it, because at the moment it's being torn to pieces, isn't it? It was supposed to be, it's supposed to get through Parliament much sooner. It's being constantly watered down, and I think that there are elements of that bill that don't even go far enough.
Oh, Alex.
I would have no argument with saying put a paywall on pornography sites, and if men go, oh, I wouldn't want to trust my card details on a site like that. OK, so what do you think the provenance of those videos are? Are you sure that woman's not being trafficked? Are you sure that woman's not being abused and exploited?
Well, actually, pornography is covered in the bill. So, we could literally have a whole show talking about the online safety bill and about some of the dangers that are presented to children and young people and vulnerable adults too. But unfortunately, I've got to go into the break. So, coming up, the public have lost faith in the police after the MEP monster David Carrick was sentenced to 30 years behind bars. My next guest is Britain's first black police crime commissioner. Festus Akinbusoye tells me about his mission to crack down on bad cops. That's after the break. Welcome back to Friday Night with Nadine. It's one of the biggest police scandals in recent history. Serving Met officer David Carrick was this week sentenced to 30 years behind bars for a catalogue of gruesome sexual offences over 2 decades. Trust in the police is at an all-time low, so how do you build it back? My next guest made history by becoming the first black police and crime commissioner in Britain, actually in my own area of Bedfordshire. Festus Akinbusoye is on a mission to overhaul the system and crack down on corrupt officers, and he joins me now. So, Festus, what can we do? Do you think David Carrick got the right sentence of 30 years? And I'll give you 2 questions here. What can we do? I know, you're doing a huge amount in Bedfordshire, but what can we do to restore trust in the police?
I think first thing to bear in mind is that if anyone was thinking that he would get a life sentence of the level that he got, I think people would be quite surprised in some ways, because the threshold for those kind of sentences in some cases are if there's a murder, for example, like with the case of the terrible ex-Met officer who murdered Sarah Everard. So I think, on balance, that was the right sentence. But, look, what we have to accept is this. This is another case, again, of terrible, terrible conduct by a serving police officer. And what is quite striking about this is that this man was a police officer for almost 2 decades. And people are talking about vetting as if vetting would have solved this problem. In my opinion, having been a special constable in Bedfordshire myself, and seeing the fantastic work that so many police officers in our country and certainly in our county do, vetting is not the solution here. It would be very disappointing if the focus was on vetting, because some of these men were vetted and they passed vetting and they went to become, special protection unit teams, they became firearms officers. So at each step, they went through a different level of enhanced vetting, and they went through and they got through.
And they still got through.
And they were still doing all this. So vetting surely can't be the only.
So what are you doing in Bedfordshire with our force to make sure that you weed out bad cops?
There has to be transparency. That's very, very important. So I sent a letter to the Chief Constable, Trevor Rodenhurst, a couple of weeks ago. I told him that
you appointed?
Yes. Fantastic man, by the way, right man at the right time for Bedfordshire Police. I told him that I'm going to make these questions public. And he was going to reply to me, and he agreed for his responses to be made public as well, because my view is there can't be anything to hide on this kind of issue. And he did provide a very comprehensive answer. So one of the things that we're doing as well is investing in PSD, which is called the Professional Standards Department. And this, basically, they are police officers who investigate other police officers. And some people might think that is unfair, because having cops investigating cops. But, criminal-minded police officers know how to get around the system. Who best to investigate them than someone who knows the system, who knows the game, who knows what they will do.
So, do you know, I hope other forces are listening to you and other police and crime commissioners across the country, because that kind of model of transparency needs to be put in place fast so that we get rid of people like the corrupt people who are few, but they're giving the police a bad name, that they're removed as fast as possible. So I want to move on to stop and search. So stats have shown that black people, young black people, are 7 times more likely to be stopped in stop and search. Now, I know it's happened to you.
Yeah.
Do you think it's necessary? Do you think there are ways that it can be changed? Do you think it prevents knife crime, which is a real problem at the moment?
I'm in a very unique situation here, having been on both sides of this. It shouldn't be a controversial thing, but it is for obvious reasons. I have been stopped and searched, like you said, 6 times, 3 times in London when I grew up in East London, and then once in Hertfordshire, once in Buckinghamshire, and once in Bedfordshire, but none since I've been a police and crime commissioner, by the way, just to add.
Everyone knows who you are.
But I've also used that same power as a special constable on black people, white people, Asian people. It doesn't matter to me. And I've seen this being used in a very professional and effective way. But at the same time, a young man that I used to mentor many years ago in London, before I moved out of London, he was brutally beaten to death with a dog chain in Silvertown, not too far from where we are. I was talking to his mom and sister a couple of weeks ago, and hearing the impact almost 17 years later of what this has done to them, and on his younger brothers who are now adults themselves. He was only 16 or 17 at the time. You know, and I still remember him like, I used to drive him to church. I remember him sitting in the front of the car with his brothers. So when I have those kind of experiences and the public wants the police to crack down on weapons, to crack down on street violence, to crack down on these horrific crimes, what are the options that the police have? They don't have an X-ray machine to see what's going in what people have got in their pockets, right? They have to be able to use the power. So I do support stop and search, so long as it's done in a lawful, justifiable, and measured way. I can't think of another alternative that can adequately replace stop and search. But stop and search alone cannot do the job in keeping our streets safe. It can only be one of a plethora of tools that police officers have.
So, Festus, I've got to say, I'm one of your biggest fans, and I think you're doing a fantastic job.
Thank you.
And your journey from growing up in Nigeria to becoming a police and crime commissioner in Bedfordshire has been a really fascinating one. What a lot of people don't know about you is that you're a single dad, and that you do this while you're doing the homework and the washing and everything else.
They're taking a taxi today now.
Yeah, I know. I'm being a chauffeur and a taxi driver and all the rest of it. But have you ever thought of moving? Because I think you'd be an amazing candidate. And you may know there's a vacancy just come up in Mid-Bedfordshire. Have you ever thought of moving from your role as a police and crime commissioner into frontline politics?
Well, look, I genuinely love being the police and crime commissioner.
I know you do, and that's why you'd make a really good MP.
I enjoy I really love what I'm doing. I feel like I've been able to make a really positive impact in just 22 months and a couple of weeks. Not like I'm counting, of course, but I enjoy it. But one thing I've really come to do, though, is to gain a real passion for public service. Whether as a councillor or as a member of parliament or as a commissioner, I have gained a different level of respect for people who choose to put themselves out there. I come from a business background. That's what I've ever done. I've got about 50, 60 people working for me. Nothing prepares you for the kind of highs and lows of public life, the pressures, the anger. I was hearing some of the things you were saying earlier on about what people can be like on social media. But, you know, when you're able to help someone to achieve something that without your intervention would not have happened, it's an amazing feeling. So that is probably not the answer that you were looking for, but at the moment, I feel very privileged to be where I'm at.
I'm going to be working on you, Festus. I think you'd make a fantastic MP. Coming up, so it's Friday night, so we've got a little something for your weekend. Politicians are notorious for enjoying a bit of sing-along, and now Britain's best karaoke tune has been revealed. Don't go anywhere. That's all coming next. Welcome back to Friday Night with Nadine. Still with me as Festus, Alex, Quentin and Christopher. But, you know, it's Friday night, so why don't you all at home kick back and relax with a glass of wine while I serve up something for the weekend? Neil Diamond's Sweet Caroline has been revealed as Britain's best karaoke song. Followed up by Queen's We Will Rock You, that is not one of my favourites, and ABBA's Dancing Queen. Missing from that list is Tom Jones' hit Delilah, which is banned from matches by the Welsh Rugby Union, who say the lyrics are offensive. Politicians love a bit of a sing-along. Remember Therese Coffey?
When it comes to color, he won't be singing. I'm loving summer instead.
OK, Festus. So what a lot of people don't know, you know, is that Therese Coffey, who was on the video there, she introduced karaoke to Parliament. Every time you see an MP put a mic to their mouth and start singing a karaoke song, it all began with Therese, and she's actually got a really good voice. She's got a really good singing voice. So
she's the Dame Vera Lynn of SWR. Gracie Fields.
Not quite. So, what's your favourite karaoke song, guys? Christopher, I'll start with you.
Well, I'm afraid, Alex, I love Islands in the Stream. I think it's a Kenny Rogers, Dolly Parton. It's a great duet.
Do you like Dolly Parton, do you?
I like Kenny Rogers. You're my Dolly Parton, Quentin.
You know, we were discussing this earlier, and I asked the guys in the green room, and as soon as Chris said Islands in the Stream, I was like, oh my gosh, that's mine. I finally found a Kenny to my Dolly.
Really? Oh, that's amazing. What about you, Quentin? Because you sing too, don't you?
I sing hymns in church, but I've never been to a karaoke in my life. And I have no idea what I like.
Why am I not surprised?
It's not my sort of thing. You know,
Would anyone dare sing Delilah? Would you sing Delilah?
Yeah, of course. Anything to upset the Welsh Rugby.
You know, I sing it because it's being banned.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
What I don't understand...
It's like banning Shakespeare, because it's just bloody. I mean, what?
If they're banning Delilah, surely they've got to ban Bread of Heaven, because it says, feed me till I want no more. I mean, that's just going to trigger bulimics, right?
Has Delilah has ever been responsible for a single act of domestic violence or a single knife crime? What do you think, Festus? What's yours? We've got 20 seconds.
So because I went to university during the time of the height of Oasis.
So it's Oasis with you?
Yes. So it will probably Don't Look Back in Anger.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's an absolute classic.
That's the story of your career epitaph.
Don't
look
that
back
was
in
not
anger,
intentional, by the way.
Well, we've got to go now, guys. So this brings us to the end of tonight's show, sadly. Thank you for joining me, and thank you to Festus, Alex, Quentin, Christopher, all of you. It's been absolutely fantastic. I'm back at 8 p.m. next week for more Friday fun, and we're off for a drink now because we all definitely deserve it. Thanks, everyone. Cheers.